South Africa's national dialogue or national convention, the sort of macro version of the national dialogue, has recently kicked off, made a relatively inauspicious start, but there are still opportunities that it provides to South Africans to highlight various challenges and shortcomings of the ANC specifically. So, despite their best intentions, this might be yet another opportunity for South Africa to point the finger at the ANC, to quote President Ramaphosa during the Zondo Commission, as accused number one. Joining us to discuss the national dialogue, the current challenges facing the ANC domestically and internationally, as well as the possibility of South Africa losing access to the SWIFT system of international payments with implications for our banking financial sector specifically, is Dr. John Endres, CEO of the Institute of Race Relations. John, thank you very much for joining us once again this week. I think lots of things in flux at the moment. We've rarely seen the ANC under more pressure than they are right now. A recent Democratic Alliance poll released in the last 2 weeks indicates the ANC below 30% nationally, and also that the DA will overtake the ANC in next year's local government elections, especially in the three major metros in Gauteng. We'll get into that a little bit later. Just to start off with your initial impressions of the National Convention, the broader national dialogue project. What does it tell you about some of the thinking within the leadership of the ANC at the moment? Anything that you picked up on in terms of what the president said, maybe what other senior ANC leaders said during the convention, and what you picked up on that other people
Yeah, Chris, morning. I'd say that the national dialogue is a study in the law of unintended consequences. And I think all that comes out of it that is good was not intended. And most of what was intended won't be achieved by the national dialogue. So the national dialogue is a very long process as it is envisaged, starting off with this convention of over 1,000 people gathering to launch proceedings, I guess, and to be followed by lots of stakeholder engagements, meetings across the country where people talk about all sorts of things at a cost of about R500 million. So vastly expensive. We think probably designed to elevate the ANC's stature ahead of the local government elections next year. It gives it a beautiful stage on which to present itself. But it was probably a miscalculation, strategic miscalculation on the part of the ANC, and maybe a fatal miscalculation in the sense that what the ANC has done is create a huge stage lit brightly by spotlights on its own failings. And that is not ideal if you're trying to market yourself ahead of an election, for example. You don't precisely want to highlight your own failings. So this entire process, I think, is hugely risky for the ANC. I think it was not a good decision to launch this at this time. And I think that it reflects a certain level of disconnect between the ANC's assessment of the state of the country, the state of itself as a party, and where the rest of the country is seeing the ANC now. And so it was a very dangerous decision for the ANC to make. I suspect that it's not going to produce the results that the ANC had hoped for, but to the contrary, might weaken its prospects ahead of the elections.
And John, when we look at the ongoing relationship between the ANC, the GNU, and large corporates or businesses in South Africa, should any of the latter decide to support the broader national convention and then specifically the national dialogue going forward, what advice or guidance, if any, would you offer them to, if they think that there could be value in that kind of process? Because I link this to some internal discussions that we've had, and you've highlighted how this is broadly part of sort of South Africa's messy democracy. It's not in and of itself going to solve South Africa's various problems, of which the audience will be unfortunately very aware on a day-to-day basis: crime, failing infrastructure, high unemployment, low growth. But maybe contrast with some other countries where this kind of thing won't happen. It's not everywhere where South Africans get to sit in the audience and in a way heckle their president.
Yeah, so that was one of the unintended positive consequences out of those first 2 days of meetings, which was that we saw South Africans displaying their lack of unity. And I think that in South African political discourse, unity is often valued very highly, certainly by the ANC. And I think it is overvalued to a certain extent because a successful democracy is one that recognizes that people have different priorities, different interests, pursue different objectives, and allows that to happen and says, okay, we realize, people are all different. They all want different things. That's actually fine as long as you've got a mechanism and some rules for handling that, then we're okay. And that is what the national dialogue is basically showing us. You see lots of people heckling each other, disagreeing with the rules of engagement, questioning the purpose of the entire exercise, debating the way forward, etc., etc. That is democracy in action. But it's not. This is not the right way to design to create unity. Firstly, I don't think that's going to work. And secondly, I think it's also not the right way to design policy. So if the goal is to find a way for South Africa to emerge from its downward trajectory, getting 1,000 people together in a dark conference hall over 2 days, heckling each other, is not the way to do that. And I think that the community engagements also are not the way to do that. People will say what worries them, what angers them, which is already well known. We know that the lack of jobs is a huge problem. Incomes are stagnant. There's a lot of poverty around. Government services are not of the quality that people expect of them. This is known, and that is what these stakeholder engagements are going to confirm. So, as I said, I think it's a costly exercise. Whatever benefits it produces will be unintended benefits, and the goals that it hopes to achieve, it will not achieve. Probably for corporates, I think they should probably keep their distance because this is going to unfold as quite a chaotic process, and probably not going to improve the reputation of those involved.
John, then linking the start of the national dialogue with the ANC's current sort of status quo or state of affairs, where I mentioned the latest DA polling. We're recording on the 27th of August, and the DA poll, I think, was released on the 14th of August. So it is quite recent. They're going to conduct this every 2 weeks, so sort of rolling basis in the metros in the lead up to next year's elections. This will be taken in conjunction with other polls. And what we always mention is that one should take a poll not as a predictor of a future electoral outcome, but as a point in time to tell you it's a bit of a sort of measuring the temperature, gauging the mood in the room at a given point of time amongst, in this case, registered voters. And it points to serious concerns for the ANC in terms of their electoral support below 30% nationally and being overtaken by the DA in the three major Gauteng metros. You take that in conjunction with the pressures being applied at this point in time by the Trump administration on the ANC specifically. So I was in Washington a few weeks ago, and some of the feedback that I received was that the pressure is going to continue through things like the US-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act, the Trump administration assessing that one of the ways that they think they can get the kind of change, the kind of pro-growth, pro-investment policy change in South Africa is by applying pressure on the ANC through things like targeted sanctions, if this Review Act then comes into full implementation. So targeted sanctions on ANC and government individuals implicated in corruption and human rights abuses. This confluence of international and domestic pressures, do you think it guarantees the decline of the ANC, that the party now really is on the out? We should prepare really for a new reality and no longer worry about the ANC being any kind of player?
Yeah, I think there's now a real risk that what we're looking at is not just a decline, but an impending collapse of the ANC. And that is a prospect that we should maybe not welcome too enthusiastically, because that will create a lot of instability, given that it's been such a prominent part of South Africa's political life, social life, economic life for over 3 decades. The disappearance of such a major player is going to be quite disruptive. Maybe it's early days to call that. So the decline is something we're seeing. We're seeing the ANC really shedding support electorally, as revealed in last year's elections, but also ongoing now, as shown in polling. That's a huge concern for the party. And I fear that there's an even greater threat on the horizon, which is now unfolding with astonishing rapidity. And that is a loss of belief by South Africans in the ANC. So where for a long time, the ANC was widely recognized to be at the center of South African political life, decision-making, policies, etc. And people recognized its authority in this position, its stature, its reputation. That is now very rapidly ebbing away. And increasingly, when people talk about the ANC, they do so in terms that are contemptuous, dismissive, sort of not recognizing its authority. And that is going to trigger a kind of feedback loop within the ANC itself, where as the external belief in the ANC drops, so its self-belief also drops. And as an ANC member or ANC leader, you're going to start questioning yourself and asking yourself, are we really the embodiment of South Africans? Are we really the anointed leaders of the society? Do we have what it takes? And I think once that self-doubt starts creeping in addition to external belief draining away, that is probably the greatest threat a party like this can face. Because, then it's really forced to, if it wants to come up with a solution, to dig deep. Then it needs to reconnect with its original values. It needs to produce some results that it can be proud of. It needs someone to demonstrate leadership within the party, to demonstrate what the vision for the party is, what the positive vision for the party is, as well as for the country. And all of that is very difficult. And currently, I think we're not seeing the party doing that. And so the prognosis at the moment for the ANC is not good. It looks like it's losing authority, its reputation is dropping, its self-belief will also drop, and that is ultimately a potentially mortal threat to the ANC. We saw a long circular from the Secretary General, I think, was it yesterday, coming out of the ANC, which is visibly an attempt to counteract that trend. So that circular, tries to reestablish the moral desirability of the national dialogue. It tries to reestablish the authority of the ANC. It tries to reestablish the authority of the leadership of the ANC within the party, as in, disciplining people who speak out of turn, and publicly reveal the self-doubt that is beginning to creep in. This is the party leadership trying to contain that. But the problem is that you can't really do that with words only. And as other people's belief in you drains away, so your credibility of your assertions that you really are in control also drains away. And so this is a kind of vortex that the ANC is heading into now. It's sort of in the outer circles spinning, but it's going to start spinning faster and faster as it moves towards the center. And it's quite a dramatic situation, I think, that we're heading to.
Just on that point of what the ANC needs to do going forward, and indeed what South Africa needs to do. So one talks this concept of radical honesty, but then also taking action based on that. So, and I contrast here the ANC with the South African national rugby team, the Springboks, where some of the recent reporting and quotes from within the camp after 2 weeks ago when the Springboks lost to Australia was, and I'm going to quote here, the coach of the team, Rassie Erasmus, who said the team played like for a coach to say that, but then actually for the team to take what happened to them and then adapt accordingly. What can you tell us about what the ANC needs to do sort of practically? So, and here especially on the sort of policy side, in terms of what they need to move away from, or at least start to shift the needle on. And I'm not talking here about getting the trains to run on time, just not that I don't appreciate when I flip a light switch and there's electricity, not just ensuring that the lights stay on, that kind of thing. What does it get to the heart of what the ANC needs to do when it hears everything at the different community engagements and at the national dialogue and all that sort of thing? What would this time make it any different?
Yeah, I think that your point about radical honesty is a really good one, because that's also linked to credibility. Right? So if you're a leader who habitually makes lofty promises that you don't keep, then you don't have the credibility to lead a team or inspire a team. But if you're the kind of leader who does say, look, we screwed up badly on this one, let it not happen again, let's figure out what went wrong, let's fix it, let's move on, then you've got a chance. And that kind of honesty has been lacking from the ANC so far. And I think to some extent it is still lacking. I think the willingness to acknowledge the sad state of affairs is beginning to creep in. So we saw, the President Ramaphosa at the post-NEC press conference saying that the ANC was in a state of emergency. So that's being recognized. So the economy is in a state of emergency. That's good. So at least there's recognition. But I think the causes are not accepted yet. And the only path to salvation for the ANC now consists in rapid movement forward. And that would actually mean embracing rather than pushing away its alliance partner, the DA, so that the coalition partner, the DA, because the only salvation for the ANC now is going to be results and it's going to be economic growth. And it's not going to get that if it goes into any form of partnership with the EFF or MK. It can only get that by enthusiastically and on a basis of trust, working with the DA and with civil society partners who promote a pro-growth agenda. So if I was the ANC now, if I was in charge, I would see it as my job to convince the 100 NEC members that the threat we are now facing is potentially existential to the ANC, that we've run out of options, and there's no longer a way for us to save ourselves by continuing down the same route that we've gone so far. There's literally only one option for us, and that is to go for growth, and go for broke on going for growth. Putting all our eggs in that basket and saying, okay, this might work, it might not work, could backfire terribly. It's very risky because we're departing from many of our core values and core policies, but it's literally the only thing left for us now is to do this thing. And that means embracing the kinds of reforms that produce economic growth. And that means labor market deregulation. It means removing race-based laws from the economy. It means promoting merit above skin color or political connections in appointments. It means securing property rights. It means wooing your most important trading partners rather than pushing them away. It means improving your diplomatic relations and not leaving important diplomatic posts vacant, as we wrote in a recent client note. It means getting your act together, doing things right, and fixing the place up, making it attractive for investment so that we get above that 15% fixed investment rate that we're at the moment as share of GDP, and closer to 25%, which is the world average, or better, above 30%. And then we can see this economy take off.
Yes, indeed. John, a final question. So I touched on it a little bit earlier, the international pressure emanating, especially from the Trump White House, but not only from the White House. I think there's a bit of a mistaken assumption that the pressure is only coming from there. The pressure is coming from Congress as well, and it's bipartisan. So South Africa shouldn't make that mistake to think that at the end of President Trump's second term that things are all hunky-dory again. There are serious doubts about the South Africa-US relationship across the party aisle. But I'm going to focus here specifically on the possibility of financial sanctions on South Africa from the US. And here we've got recent reporting that Minister of Finance Enoch Godongwana held discussions with South Africa's top banking executives on the potential fallout should Washington impose sanctions on the country. From your assessment, and we have written on this and analyzed this, I think over the last 12 months, at least sort of 12 to 18 months, that this could be on the table. So we're talking about specifically about South Africa's removal from the SWIFT system of international payments. But of course, should that happen, should other financial sanctions happen, that won't be the only thing that happens, right? It will have other implications for the banking sector, for our broader financial sector, and indeed for South African government finances.
Yeah, I think removal from the SWIFT system is a very drastic step, and I hope it is one that it doesn't come to, because that would have very significant repercussions, not just for sanctioned individuals who might be targeted, but for the economy as a whole. And the reason for this is that we are globally integrated in the world economy. We buy a lot from other countries. We sell a lot to other countries. And if we no longer have access to the SWIFT system, then making payments for the goods we buy and receiving payment for the goods that we sell becomes a lot harder and more expensive. It would mean that we'd face, I think, quite a high level of imported inflation, because bringing fuel into the country, for example, becomes more expensive, takes longer, and that's going to ripple throughout the economy, driving up costs across the economy. It will also raise the risk premium on South Africa. South Africa will be seen as a more risky investment destination. So our 15% fixed investment is more likely to go down rather than up, so exactly in the wrong direction. Our interest rates would go up. Debt would become less affordable to people with mortgages, for example, or with car loans. And so overall, the consequences would be really bad. And I think the US administration, I suspect, is going to think very hard before it takes such a drastic step. I think they prefer to introduce limited forms of sanction rather than blanket forms of sanction for now. And maybe also in a kind of escalating way, where instead of going all in on maximum punishment, they'll have a few shots across the bow, one by one, raising the temperature, raising the pressure. And of course, this is now being directed at a political party in the form of the ANC that is in no shape to respond sensibly to this. And I think currently what we're seeing is that the response is really one of irrational defiance, in the sense of bring it on, we don't care, do your worst. But of course, that's a very irresponsible way of responding to threats like this, which are quite substantial and quite important for the country. So let's hope that cooler heads prevail within the ANC, and find a way to acknowledge US concerns and to avert some of the potential trouble coming down the road towards us.
Just on that very last point, John, I know I said the previous question was the last question, but that's such a good point that you made now, just on taking the right kind of lessons or signals from what the US is sending. And to say, not that I hope for the scenario, but to say to the ANC, or for the ANC to figure out, look, okay, the relationship with the US can't be salvaged. That is what it is. What in South Africa's domestic policy hierarchy or setup makes us less attractive for investment? What is holding back growth, job creation, higher levels of fixed investment? We've gotten this opportunity now that the US is applying on us, this pressure. How do we make South Africa attractive to the US and to other countries on the right kinds of basis to push South Africa's national interest from a growth point of view, from a thriving society point of view? I mean, yeah, don't be so, don't shoot the messenger in this case, or just blame the messenger, as it were, or the person, the originator of the message, in this case, the White House. Take the lessons from it. I know it's uncomfortable, but take the right kind of lessons. Don't just lean into sort of areas of comfort and have your liberation movement summits and all that kind of thing, where you think you're held up as this liberation movement and not a party that has to actually govern and has to deliver services and make a pro-business, pro-growth environment from a policy point of view.
So I mean, that's the interesting thing, is that the solution to both of the problems we've discussed this morning are the same. So the same solutions will solve the ANC's problem of declining support, credibility, and belief, and solve the problem of US, confrontation towards South Africa. So this is very much an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone, if you choose to do so. And you mentioned the word opportunity. I think there's an opportunity in the relationship with the US still, in the sense that I think as Frans Cronje, the former director of the CRA, put it, what we should be trying to get from the US and selling to the US is the biggest deal in Africa's history. So just imagine how that would play. President Trump, loves hyperbole. He now loves the biggest, the hugest, the most amazing of everything. And if we as South Africa could say, okay, President Trump, let's do this. Let's put together the biggest deal in the history of Africa with massive investment in energy generation and steel production and infrastructure upgrades. Let's create this huge boom. How amazing would that be? I think that would be, that would find a reception in the United States. That would play very, very well. So that's the one opportunity we've got, is in the relationship with the United States. There's a second opportunity, and that is the government of national unity. And remember that in our analysis over the past year, we pointed out that there was sort of a lift of hopefulness and of sentiment in response to the GNU, which is now fizzling out. But that can be rekindled, So if you saw sort of the pro-growth reform agenda taking proper hold inside the GNU, and the DA and the ANC pulling in the same direction and saying, let's get this economy to ignite, let's make it spark, let's make it fizz, let's get the investment in, that would be absolutely possible. So actually, the stars are well aligned to make that happen, but it does take decision making and a little bit of visionary leadership to recognize that opportunity.
We'll highlight in closing on that last point. There's probably no better time for South Africa to make a deal with the US, a trade and tariff deal than now. Some of the additional feedback that I received in Washington is that, President Trump, for all the rhetoric towards South Africa, he is a deal maker. He wants to identify opportunities. He's looking for countries and regions to take responsibility and to give the US a pro-growth, pro-investment, to give the administration that evidence. Some of those who might succeed him, people such as the Vice President J.D. Vance, perhaps the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, they are more focused on ideological matters than even President Trump is. So they will, I think, be even more vigorous, as it were, and energetic in applying pressure on a country like South Africa, with whom they will have serious policy disagreements and values disagreements, than President Trump. So to the ANC, don't spurn this opportunity to make a deal with one of probably the greatest deal makers that one will have in the White House ever. That is how he operates, and you have to use that to your opportunity. But we're going to wrap up on that note. John, thank you very much for your time, your insights with us on the CRA YouTube channel. To all of you, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't yet at this point in the video liked the video, we invite you to do so. We also invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And finally, should you be interested and find value in our analysis here, we have a lot more to offer in terms of our weekly risk alerts, our client notes, macro reviews, as well as our client query support service. So for any information on that to become a CRA premium client, please contact us today at the link in the description below. Until next time, this has been Chris Hattingh for the Center for Risk Analysis. Take care.